The woman's hand slipped from the rock just as Jonas Cade's fingers closed around her wrist. Below them, the Silver Thread River roared white and furious, swollen with spring melt from the high peaks. Her eyes met his, wide, terrified, but somehow defiant even as death rushed beneath her boots. He would remember that look for the rest of his life. The moment he decided to pull instead of let go. But that came later. 3 days earlier, Jonas had been alone in his cabin, 8 miles up the mountain from the nearest settlement, exactly where he wanted to be. The April morning broke cold and clear over the Bitterroot Range, frost still clinging to the ponderosa pines that ringed his property. He stood at his workbench, running a whetstone along the edge of his skinning knife, the rhythmic scrape the only sound besides the snap of the fire. He was a big man, built from decades of splitting wood and hauling elk carcasses through deep snow. His hands were scarred and capable, his beard thick and threaded with gray though he'd only just turned 40. The people in Timber Falls called him a hermit when they bothered to call him anything at all. Mostly they just avoided the trail that led to his land. That suited Jonas fine. The knock came just after dawn the next day, hesitant, almost apologetic. Jonas opened the door to find Sheriff Dutch Emery standing on his porch, hat in his hands. "Jonas, need your help." "No. Missing woman. Claire Merrick, schoolteacher from Timber Falls. Didn't show up for class yesterday morning. Her room at the boarding house was cleared out, but Martha Gaines saw her heading up the North Trail 2 nights ago, crying, carrying a carpet bag." Jonas leaned against the doorframe. "Woman wants to leave town. That's her business." Normally I'd agree. Dutch shifted his weight, boots scraping the worn planks. But Garrett Merrick's been asking questions. Her husband came back from a lumber run to find her gone. He's insistent we bring her back. Something in the way Dutch said it made Jonas look at him harder. The sheriff's jaw was tight, his eyes troubled. "Insistent how? The kind that makes me think she had good reason to run." Deutsch cleared his throat. "He's already got men searching the low country. If they find her first." He let the sentence hang. Jonas stared past the sheriff toward the tree line. He'd spent 15 years on this mountain specifically to avoid other people's problems. He'd left behind a wife who'd preferred whiskey and a traveling preacher to their marriage vows, a town that had pitted him, and a life that had felt like wearing boots 2 sizes too small. Up here, he answered to no one. Needed no one. "North Trail leads to the old mining roads," Jonas said finally. "If she doesn't know the country, she could get turned around. There's a dozen ways to die up there if you're not careful. That's why I'm asking you." Jonas grabbed his coat from the peg. "Oh look, but if I find her and she wants to keep running, I'm not dragging her back." Dutch nodded slowly. "Fair enough." The North Trail was still muddy from snow melt, and Jonas found her tracks easily. Small boots, unsteady gait, heading higher into country that would kill her if she wasn't careful. He moved fast, reading the signs. She'd stopped twice to rest, once to drink from a creek. She was maybe 8 hours ahead of him. By midday he'd closed the gap to 4 hours. By evening he could smell the smoke from her campfire. He found her just before dark, huddled beside a pitiful little fire in a grove of aspens. She jumped up when he stepped into the clearing, a piece of firewood clutched in both hands like a club. "Stay back." Jonas stopped, raised his hand slowly. "Sheriff Emery sent me. Said you went missing." "I'm not missing. I left." Her voice shook, but her chin stayed up. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe late 20s, with dark blonde hair coming loose from its pins and a bruise blooming purple along her left cheekbone. "Fair enough. But you're 2 miles from the canyon rim and there's weather coming in. You won't make it through the night out here." "I'll manage." "No, you won't." He kept his voice level, non-threatening. "I've got a cabin about 3 miles south. It's warm, it's safe, and you can decide what you want to do in the morning when you're not half frozen." She studied him with sharp green eyes, weighing options. "You're the mountain man. Jonas Cade." "That's right. They say you don't like people." They're not wrong. Something that might have been a smile flickered across her face, then vanished. "If I go with you, and I decide to keep going tomorrow, you won't stop me?" "Your life, your choice." She lowered the firewood slowly. "All right." They made it halfway back to his cabin before the storm hit. And that's when everything changed. The snow came fast and mean, the kind of late spring squall that turned the mountain into a white maze within minutes. Jonas led Claire down the trail, one hand on her elbow to steady her as the wind tried to shove them sideways. Visibility dropped to 10 feet. How much further? She shouted over the roar. 1.5 miles. They should have made it fine. Would have, if Claire's boot hadn't caught on a root hidden beneath fresh powder. She went down hard, tumbling toward the edge of the trail where it ran alongside the Silver Thread River Gorge. Jonas lunged, caught her coat, and for a breathless second they both teetered on the crumbling edge. Then his weight pulled them back and they collapsed together in the snow, hearts hammering. Claire pushed herself up, stared at the 100-foot drop she'd nearly taken. Her face had gone bone white. Come on. Jonas hauled her to her feet. We need to move. They reached the cabin 20 minutes later, both shaking with cold and adrenaline. Jonas got the fire roaring while Claire stood dripping on his floor, arms wrapped around herself. He handed her a wool blanket and a dry shirt that would swallow her whole. There's a room through there. Change, get warm. I'll make coffee. When she emerged, the shirt hung to her knees and her hair was down, drying in dark gold waves around her shoulders. She looked younger, more fragile, but her eyes were still sharp, still wary. Jonas poured 2 cups of coffee, pushed one across the table. They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Thank you, she said finally, for coming after me, and for the cabin. He nodded, and for not asking questions. None of my business. She wrapped both hands around the cup, staring into the dark liquid. My husband is not a good man. I should have left years ago, but I kept thinking he'd change, or I'd find a way to make it work. 2 nights ago she touched the bruise on her cheek. I decided I was done making it work. Jonas's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The sheriff will tell him where I am. Claire continued. Garrett won't stop looking. He thinks I belong to him, like a piece of property. Dutch won't tell him anything. He's worried what'll happen if your husband finds you first. She looked up, surprised. The sheriff said that. Didn't have to. I could see it. They sat quiet again. Outside, the storm battered the cabin walls, but inside it was warm and still. Safe. Jonas found himself watching her hands wrapped around the coffee cup, small, capable hands with ink stains on the fingers from teaching. Teacher's hands. Gentle hands. He stood abruptly. You can stay here long as you need. I'll sleep in the workshop. Door has a bolt on the inside. Jonas. She stopped him with his name. Why are you helping me? He looked at her for a long moment. This woman who'd had the courage to run toward an uncertain future rather than accept the one slowly killing her. He saw himself in that courage, recognized the desperation that drove a person to walk away from everything they knew. Because nobody should have to run scared, he said finally. And because I know what it's like to need a place to breathe. The storm lasted 3 days. During that time, an unexpected rhythm developed. Jonas worked outside when the weather allowed, splitting wood, checking trap lines, hauling water from the creek. Claire organized his chaotic cabin, cooked meals that tasted like something other than survival, and read aloud from the 3 books on his shelf while he worked on repairs by firelight. She didn't talk much about her past, and he didn't ask. But pieces emerged. She'd been teaching for 6 years. She'd married Claire Merrick because her father's debts had left her with limited options. She'd learned to make herself small, quiet, invisible. I forgot who I was, she said on the 3rd evening, staring into the fire. Forgot there was anything else. You remembered, Jonas said. That's what matters. On the 4th morning, the sky cleared to bright blue. Jonas was checking the chimney when he heard horses on the trail. 3 riders, moving fast. He climbed down, grabbed his rifle from inside. Claire saw his face. What's wrong? Company. Claire Merrick rode into the clearing flanked by 2 men Jonas recognized from the lumber mill, hard-eyed, loyal, and mean when they needed to be. Garrett was a big man gone soft in the middle, with a thick mustache and the entitled bearing of someone who'd never been told no. There she is. Garrett swung down from his horse, eyes locked on Claire where she stood frozen on the porch. Claire, honey, you had us all worried sick. Time to come home now. I'm not going back. Her voice was steady despite the fear Jonas could see tightening her shoulders. Now don't be dramatic. You're upset, I understand, but a wife belongs with her husband. That's the law. Jonas stepped between them, rifle held loose but ready. The lady said no. Garrett's eyes narrowed. This is between me and my wife, Cade. Stay out of it. She's on my land. That makes it my business. One of the hired men moved his hand toward his gun. Jonas didn't shift his aim, but his voice dropped low. I wouldn't. The clearing went still. Jonas stood between Claire and her husband, solid as the mountain itself, the rifle steady in his scarred hands. Claire Merrick's face darkened with rage, barely held in check. "You're making a big mistake, hermit. I've got legal right to take my wife home. You've got the right to leave my property before I help you off it. Sheriff Emery will. The sheriff knows exactly where she is." Jonas cut him off. "He's the one sent me to find her. Seems to me if he wanted her brought back, he'd be here doing it himself." Garrett's jaw worked, fury and calculation warring across his features. He looked at Claire, really looked at her, and Jonas saw the moment he registered the change. She wasn't the same woman who'd lived scared in his house. She stood taller now, chin up, eyes clear. "This isn't over," Garrett spat. He jerked his horse around, his men following. But before he left, he turned back. "You know what they'll say, Claire, about you staying up here with him. Your reputation will be destroyed." "My reputation," Claire said softly, "is the last thing I'm worried about." They watched the three riders disappear down the trail. Jonas felt Claire's hand find his arm, steadying herself. Or maybe steadying him. He wasn't sure which. "He'll come back," she whispered. "Maybe, but not today." That evening, Jonas rode down to Timber Falls and found Dutch Emery making his rounds. They talked in the sheriff's office while the lamp burned low. By the time Jonas left, an understanding had been reached. The law might say Claire belonged to her husband, but there were some laws even good sheriffs chose to enforce slowly. Very slowly. Spring turned to summer on the mountain. Claire stayed. At first they told themselves it was temporary, just until she figured out her next move, found somewhere else to go. But days became weeks, and neither of them mentioned leaving anymore. She transformed the cabin from a bachelor's survival shelter into something that felt like a home. She planted a garden beside the creek, herbs and vegetables that would see them through winter. She organized his pelts and helped him prepare them for market, her careful accounting making him more in one season than he'd earned in 3. Jonas taught her to shoot, to read animal tracks, to move through the forest without making a sound. She was a quick study, absorbing everything with the focused determination of someone building a new life from scratch. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, where she read aloud while he carved, where they sat on the porch in the evenings watching the sun paint the peaks gold and purple. Slowly, carefully, something grew between them that neither dared name. "I should probably go," she said one August evening, though she didn't move from her spot beside him on the porch steps. "People in town are talking. They think, well, let them think." "Jonas." She turned to look at him, and he saw worry in her eyes. "Not for herself, but for him. I don't want to ruin what you've built here. Your peace." He looked at her for a long moment. "Had 15 years of peace up here, Claire. You know what I learned? Peace and loneliness look real similar until you've got something to compare them to." Her breath caught. "I'm not asking you to stay," he continued quietly, "but I'm not asking you to leave either. If you want to go, I'll help you get wherever you're headed. But if you want to stay..." He stopped, choosing his words carefully. "There's nothing I'd like more than having you here." She reached for his hand, laced her fingers through his. "I want to stay." They were married in September by a circuit preacher passing through the high country. Dutch Emery served as witness, along with Martha Gaines from the boarding house, the only person in town who'd spoken kindly of Claire when she'd run. It was a simple ceremony on the porch of the cabin, with the aspens turning gold around them and the mountain wind carrying the scent of pine. Claire Merrick made noise for a while, threatening legal action, but Dutch quietly made it clear that folks in Timber Falls had noticed certain things over the years. Things about Garrett's temper and Claire's bruises. Things that made a man think twice before causing trouble. Eventually, Garrett moved on to a timber operation in Montana. The town gossip faded. Life continued. 2 years later, Jonas stood at that same workbench where Claire had first found him, running a whetstone along a blade. But this time, he heard her footsteps behind him and turned to find her carrying their 6-month-old daughter on her hip. "She wants her papa," Claire said, smiling. Jonas set down the knife, took his daughter in his big hands, gentle, always gentle with her, and marveled at how completely his life had changed. The cabin that had been a hermit's hideaway now echoed with a child's laughter. The mountain he'd fled to now felt like sanctuary for all 3 of them. "What are you thinking?" Claire asked, leaning against him. He looked at his wife, at his daughter, at the life they'd built from the wreckage of their old ones. That you falling down that trail was the best thing that ever happened to me. She laughed. I didn't fall. You caught me. Same difference. No, she said, rising up to kiss him. It's not. Outside, the September sun painted the peaks gold, and somewhere far below, the Silver Thread River rushed white and endless through the canyon. But up here on the mountain, Jonas Cade, who'd spent 15 years alone, who'd sworn he needed no one, held his family close and understood at last what peace actually looked like. It looked like coming home to people who chose you, like being chosen in return, like the courage to reach out your hand when someone's falling, and the grace to let yourself be caught when you're the one who needs saving.